Let's stay on our top story and bring in Moshe Lander. He's a senior lecturer of economics at Concordia University and a former senior economist for the government of Alberta, and he's joining us from Calgary. Moshe, good to see you. Thanks for making some time.
Hello.
Moshe, I heard you on the radio this morning with my colleague Stephanie Skandaris, and she asked you, what do you think about President Trump's latest tariff threat? And you just sort of sighed. And you said, I don't know. So tell me, why don't you know? How are you processing this?
Well, in fairness to me, it was 5 o'clock in the morning where I was. So you could have asked me what I wanted for breakfast. I might have given you the same response.
Fair.
Look, it's hard to negotiate with crazy. And that's the thing, right? And you have to keep your calm. And Mark Carney has done an amazing job. He hasn't lost his temper. He hasn't blown up. He just stays the approach. And that's the great way to approach things. But we're also not seeing any leaks coming out of either side in the negotiations, which is also admirable. But that also means then that when you see something like 35% tariff threats, when we're supposed to be 10 days away from an agreement, it's where did this come from and why are you doing this now? The only thing that you could conclude is that it's got to be some negotiating tactic because there's something the Americans want, and they're going to use this as a lever to try and force the Canadians into something they otherwise wouldn't accept.
Okay, so a few things to pull apart there. Let's talk about July 21st as the date for when this trade agreement was supposed to be signed, sealed, delivered, and August 1st being the date for these new tariffs to come into place if he doesn't get what he wants. Like, what do you make of this discrepancy between the dates?
Well, Mark Carney said July 21. It's not that he did it unilaterally. You can't tell the Americans that if after July 21 we don't have a deal, then what? What's Canada's threat? So it's obviously something that the Americans had to agree to as well. When Trump was in Kananaskis for the G7 meeting, he did say that he hoped to have something concluded soon. So I'm assuming that July 21 was what he meant. What I think is happening now is that with the threat of August 1, Mark Carney's saying, great, that gives me 10 more days then to negotiate and get a better deal for Canada. So I guess it could be the Americans saying, hey, listen, if you want to drag your feet on this side of the border, then we're going to have this as our backstop, the same way that July 21 is how you feel that this is your backstop to make sure that we have a deal. Beyond that, I'm assuming that if the Americans don't like the way the deal goes, they're prepared to walk away. And because Donald Trump is not putting these tariffs in because it's in the best interest of the U.S., right. It's because it's in his own personal interest or it's in the interest of his small constituents that might support these tariffs, then he doesn't mind torpedoing the economy, knowing full well that our government can't torpedo our economy as some sort of retaliatory action.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned it could be a tactic to get something that he wants. What is it that you think he wants at this point?
Well, I think Olivia nailed it when she was on before me and saying that it was supply management. She mentioned the French, the Belgians. When I was listening, waiting to come on, I actually held up my hand and said, I oppose supply management as well. I think a lot of Canadians, if they realize the damage that it's doing to our pocketbooks, would probably start to line up as well. And one of the few areas where we could find common cause with the U.S. is that, yes, supply management is only beneficial to farmers. And if you're a farmer, of course, you're going to defend that policy. But every Canadian consumer of dairy, chicken, eggs should be outraged at what we're having to pay indirectly to support that policy. I know you played the clip where Mark Carney said, I will never get rid of it. But he was also very committed to the digital sales tax up until about 48 hours before it was to come into play. Listen, if that's the type of thing that makes us go back to where we were 9 months ago, where we had a well-functioning free trade agreement for 25 years, maybe you don't have to scrap it entirely, but maybe there's a way to try and revise it a little bit and pry that open.
I'm going to guess, Moshe, as you just answered that question, a lot of eyebrows were raised. It's a perspective we don't often hear, that you're not a fan of supply management as a Canadian citizen. So I hear you in that maybe prices would be better, but that could also make the prices quite volatile. The argument that's been presented to Canadians for so long is that not only does it protect farmers and these industries, but it actually makes sure that we're not up to the skyrocketing prices of something like eggs. We saw last year how eggs became so limited in accessibility, so incredibly expensive in terms of price in the United States. And we weren't really hit with that in Canada, and supply management was used as the argument why we weren't in that same dire situation. What do you make of these counter arguments that say, no, we need supply management to protect Canadians?
I'm totally fine with that. And you made a very reasonable argument, but we don't hear that argument. We just hear that supply management is not up for discussion. End of story. So if I came to you and said, listen, we're paying $6 at a nice steady rate where it could be $3 sometimes and $9 other times, maybe people might say, hey, I'm willing to take that risk every once in a while if that were to happen. We don't have that conversation, though. It's when every federal leader in French and English unequivocally said, I'm not touching that policy and it's not up for debate. You kind of back yourself into a corner then that if Donald Trump's going to say, hey, I'm going to hit you with 35% tariffs and escalating unless you're at least prepared to discuss it, then we don't have any leverage in those negotiations. And as you see, it's not just that the U.S., it's not just Trump. This goes back to Democratic presidents as well that objected to our supply management. And we're seeing that our European allies are saying, hey, we're not big fans of it either. And you're not going to get your free trade agreement with us to try and offset some of the damage from the U.S. trade relationship until you're ready to have that conversation. I think we just need to have the conversation, at least as to what are we prepared to give up. Basic rule of economics. You want something, you got to give up something. And it seems that we want something without having to give up something.
So you mentioned digital services tax. It was 2 weeks ago. I feel like I'm saying this again and again to everyone I talk to. But 2 weeks ago, Trump issued the Truth Social thing. We're not negotiating with Canada anymore. It's over. And then 3 days later, the Prime Minister gets rid of the digital services tax. Okay. So is there room for some back and forth on supply management, or is it a zero-sum game and it's either we're keeping it or it's gone? Like, is there a gray space in there?
It's interesting what you say with a zero-sum game. So, in fact, if you scrapped supply management, it would be a net gain for Canada. Consumers would gain more than dairy farmers would lose. But if you're talking about do we keep it or do we scrap it, is that the zero-sum game? No, of course, there's room that you can negotiate. Right now, I think those 400% tariffs that Trump was accusing us of putting in place are once you exceed the amount of milk that we drink by like a factor of 10. So yeah, it's true, the tariffs are there, but they would never kick in unless somehow we really fall in love with dairy in a way that we've never shown ourselves capable of doing. So I'm sure what you could do is you could maybe lower the limit, or you could lower the tariff amount, or you could maybe allow for some small opening where they could find some market share. The great thing, of course, with consumer choice is if you don't want it, don't buy it. It won't end up on the shelves then if everybody decides that they want to voluntarily buy Canadian. So there is room to have that negotiation. What you have to do, though, is face down the farmers' lobby, which is going to be strong in every province, and every provincial premier will run scared because that's probably going to be a key constituent that you need to win if you want to maintain power, not just at the federal level. And
just before I let you go, so we know that the Council of the Federation is meeting on July 21st. They've invited the Prime Minister. I think on July 22nd, he's going to be attending. So if what you say is true, the farmers are going to be lobbying their premiers. The premiers are going to come to the Prime Minister. How does that conversation unfold? Look, I don't think that we're going to have a supply management discussion unless Canada's back is really to the wall. Now, again, we don't know what's going on in these negotiations. We don't know what the sticking points are. We know that Trump gets something in his bonnet and he just kind of sticks with it and doesn't let it go. So it could be that we're looking at supply management. Maybe that's not even the topic that they're stuck on. So it's entirely possible that come July 22nd, everything works out for the best. And this is merely a negotiating tactic, or it's one of those trying to distract all of us right now. So we're looking over here where, in fact, the real action is going on somewhere else, which is certainly something that he's done time and again. And that's why we see that sometimes when he makes an announcement, the next day, the news cycle goes 180 with something totally different. Moshe Lander, always good to get your perspective. Thank you so much for your time. Anytime.